Alex, are you allowed to talk about Assassin's Creed now?
Let's see. It is 12:01 p.m. East Coast time. According to my math, the embargo for AC Unity was 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you do the 3-hour difference, yes, I can talk about Assassin's Creed Unity now.
Is it any good?
It's all right.
It's a lot of build up
I
for
know.
a shrug.
That's the thing. I'm watching this reaction this morning, and I'm seeing the way people are talking about that game with these kind of like hushed whispers, like it is this abject disaster. And the reality is, yeah, that game's got some real big fucking problems, and I mean big fucking problems. But it's also not the worst game that game could have been. Like it is. I don't even. All right, so where should we start
Let's
with
back
this?
up. Let's back up.
Let's back up a little bit.
One good morning slash afternoon. We,
Hi, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
I'm all right. It's raining. I went outside. I had to keep looking outside the window to see when there was a break in the rain, so I could get my dog out there before it did its business all over my apartment. I found a brief window 10 minutes ago. Was very excited about it. Got out there, realized it's also you need gloves. We're getting to glove weather. It's
Oh boy.
oh, it was rough out there. But I got back inside, and yeah, so we were gonna have a morning show on Monday as per usual, but then we realized, oh, the Assassin's Creed Unity embargo is on Tuesday, so let's wait till Tuesday. And then I tried to do a Binding of Isaac stream, but then they patched Binding of Isaac, and it causes problems with the streaming software I use to cause the frame rate to dip to like single digits. So that was a completely botched attempt to fill that slot. And then we realized that the embargo is later than we thought, so we couldn't do the morning show at the normal time that we thought we were going to do it. So we pushed that back. And also, like as that was happening, and a lot of people were wondering, wait, hold, it's like release day. There's all these Dragon Age Inquisition reviews hitting, and that game doesn't come out till next week. Like how is Assassin's Creed Unity? That game went live at 2 a.m. last night for people that pre-ordered it on Steam and PSN and Xbox Live, and that's because their embargo was 12 hours after the game's release.
Yeah. So let's start with that. Let's start with the embargo for this game. It is not uncommon for a publisher to put an embargo on release day. Usually it's in the morning. Sometimes it's a little later in the morning, like in this case. But in all but the most shady of circumstances, usually when that takes place, it's lining up with when the game releases digitally, be that on Steam or on current gen consoles with their stores and such. Usually that shit lines up pretty closely, if not exact. When you have a situation like this where the embargo is so far after the actual release of the game, where pretty much everyone can buy it and has been able to buy it for hours, according to what people have been saying. There is
It
very
went
good.
live at like 2 in the morning last night for my
Yeah.
reload on PSN. So, I mean, I played it for 45 minutes before we jumped on this delayed morning show, and
Yeah.
in that sense, I was more free to talk about the game than you were.
Yes, I know, and that's the thing that drives me up the wall. Because if I had known that this game was releasing at the time that it was, I probably would have sent a very carefully worded email to someone saying, "Hey, this is kind of fucked." But instead, I woke up today and found out that the game was already out and people were already talking about its various tech issues and such. And here I was essentially gag ordered until noon. Now, the thing about embargoes is, I could probably weasel my way out of that shit if I really wanted to, but in some respects, it's probably better just to hold to it because, when they say you're agreeing to an embargo, they're sending you the game under the understanding that you will review the game at the time that is allotted. I might not have been quite so eager to do so if I had known that the game was releasing so much earlier. But nonetheless, my review wouldn't have been done anyway because that game is insanely long. It has an insane amount of stuff in it. and I'm still playing it. Like I still have at least 4 more of those main story sequences to do before I'm finished with it. So I'm still playing it anyway. Uh, that said, there are reviews that are out now, and it sounds like the reviews are, based on what I've quickly glimpsed, a lot of 6s and 7s. So I don't, a lot of people are grousing and talking about it like, it's this horrible game, but in reality, it's actually just a pretty deeply flawed AC that reminds me a lot of 3, but with more technical problems.
Yeah, I guess to your first point about the embargo stuff. Embargoes are a very complicated thing. I tweeted a fair amount about it this morning as I came to understand what the embargo is, and yeah, similar to when a movie doesn't have any screenings ahead of release, when an embargo is after the time that people can play it, that's not a great sign. It's so hilariously contrasted against Dragon Age Inquisition, a game that comes out next week. The press was given lots of time to play it ahead of time, whereas it appears with Unity, even the distribution of review copies seems to have been inconsistent. And that review is out a full week in advance. Reviews are basically glowing across the board with some pretty serious caveats about technical issues and blah, 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 blah. But that shows that EA is like, hey, we've got a great game, and we want people to know about it in advance. We're going to give critics a chance to play it in advance. I guess it's possible some of them won't like it, but they went out the door thinking that that's probably a game people are going to like, and word of that's going to get out a week in advance. Whereas this, so think of the various ways this can sort of play out. On one hand, Giant Bomb or other outlets could have said, no, we're not going to abide by this embargo. We're going to buy the game preloaded on one of our machines, start playing it as soon as it unlocks at 2 a.m., and then write something up in the morning, which means at most you would have 6 to 7 hours of play in a game that appears to be very clearly 30 plus, and would that have been reflective of the experience in the totality? Probably not. Do you agree to the embargo in the hopes of providing your readership with an experience from your perspective that covers everything that's in the game, but due to agreeing to the game getting to you early, has to come after the time that a lot of people want to start playing that game immediately because it's out and they want to be part of the launch furor? That's a really difficult proposition, and one of the ways that I talked about it on Twitter was that I think what the press has done is agree to a lot of short-term infractions that are agreed to because they're trying to do the best thing for their audience, which is to provide them with, depending on how why you're writing review, whether it's purely as a form of criticism or more as a buying recommendation, however you fall on that, outlets are often agreeing to this because they're trying to do right by their audience. But by outlets continuing to agree to these sorts of embargoes, they're allowing publishers to continue to push these sort of onerous restrictions on what they're allowed to say because they know they're going to accept it, because they know that they want to get the review up in a timely fashion and play the game ahead of time, because of course you would want to play it 2 weeks in advance for all sorts of crazy reasons. So it's complicated.
It is. And in this case, even though we were given this embargo, the game did not show. We did not get codes for it until I want to say it was late last week. I want to say Thursday or Friday. So I really only had the weekend to play through it. And in some cases, some sites managed to plow through that game. I have not been able to yet. It is a very large game. It is by far the biggest of the Assassin's Creeds I've ever played. There is an insane amount of world there. There is an insane amount of stuff to do. The problem I have had with it so far, and this is, granted, I've mostly been focusing on the main story campaign, but I have also been trying to dabble in as many of the different side mission types as that game has. It is an enormous amount of stuff to do, and maybe 30% of it is actually much fun at all. It is a game that is obsessed with quantity, with breadth, and the quality is not often there. The mechanics, the structure of it, the pacing of it, it's all very Assassin's Creed. In fact, it reminds me a lot of pre-boat Assassin's Creed. It has the sort of pacing and structure of some of the earlier games. It's just, there's a lot more of it. And for my part, I've just had a hard time getting into a lot of what it's been trying to get me to do. Part of it is the story, which is not interesting at all. Arno, the lead character, he's not terrible, but and he's not quite as self-serious as Connor was. But at the same time, like they haven't done anything with him up to this point in the story. Like I said, I've got like 4 or 5 of the main story missions to go through, and up to this point, I haven't cared a lick about anything that was happening. Some of the assassinations have been fun, but in all honesty, I've been able to cheese my way through most of them without really putting a whole lot of thought or strategy into any of them. I've been able to kill most of the guys I needed to kill pretty quickly, pretty easily. I'm hopeful that maybe the late game assassinations will take a little more effort and a little more planning than what I've had to do so far. But other than a couple of story missions where I just kept running into guards that were more powerful than me, I haven't had much trouble getting through it at all. And part of that is, I think, because there is so much to do in this game and so much to unlock and so many different ways to customize your dude. I've reached this point now where I've made Arno so powerful with his weapons and his armor and just all the other stuff that you can give him that I'm basically just plowing through dudes with almost no effort whatsoever. So that takes the excitement of the combat out of the mix. And then when you don't have that, all that's really left is just sort of the sneaking and the plotting and some of the other side mission types. Very few of which are actually that exciting. Some of the assassination contracts, the side contracts, I haven't really delved too deeply into those. But a lot of the other stuff is like you're running around solving murder mysteries, which does not actually involve you doing much other than turning on Eagle Vision, searching around for highlighted objects, piecing together these clues, and then just accusing someone.
It's not quite Phoenix Wright, is what you're saying.
No, it is not. It is most definitely not. And there's just a lot of stuff like that, and there's stuff everywhere, but like only a fraction of it is really all that exciting or fun. And then you get to the technical issues, which I'll say it right up. Unity is an exquisite-looking game. The environments, the lighting, world detail, all that shit.
The artists did their job.
The artists did their job. The 7 teams of artists they applied, they pooled together across several continents, put together a very amazing-looking game. They did not optimize that game in a meaningful way. I have been playing on the Xbox One. I've heard about the nightmarish frame rate issues on the PC. I have not had a chance to play that version at all yet. The Xbox One, I would not say is a total nightmare, but it is chuggy as hell. Anytime you're in a situation where there are lots of people on the screen, and that's not constant, but there are areas, the whole 5,000 people in an area kind of thing, there are areas where it is crowded as hell. And that looks amazing until you start trying to push your way through that crowd in a speedy way, and you'll see the game just kind of struggling to keep you there and keep the frame rate going. Cutscenes have been largely a mess as far as that stuff goes. Like anytime there's a cutscene or anytime it does that pullback thing when you're synchronizing in an area, that shit runs terribly. And then there are just like I hate to phrase it this way because it makes it sound like it's acceptable, which it's not. But it's a lot of the same Assassin's Creed jank that you're probably used to. Animation glitches, issues where, you're trying to scale up walls and then suddenly something breaks and you end up having to, fast travel somewhere else to get out of that spot. I've heard about people having issues like falling through the environment. That has not happened to me, but I've heard it enough times to believe it. I've also had the game crash on me, a handful of times. So it's definitely not running the way that it should. About a release day patch. I haven't heard much about that, and I don't know what systems they're talking about patching, because when I was told, when I was given the game, when I was given the code for the game, I was told that once the game downloaded, the day one patch for Xbox One would download already. So theoretically, I should already have that patch on that game, and I'm still having those issues. So there's some stuff there that is still lingering and still bad. There are parts of it that I do like. I do think that the co-op stuff is better than I expected it to be. It's not what I would call a main draw for the game, but the co-op missions, at least the few that I've dabbled in, have been pretty fun. And again, it is an awesome looking game, and there is, I mean, it's got decent acting, it's got some decent story bits in there, bit here and there, but it's just, for the most part, it's just been very dull. Like, that's the prevailing feeling I've had with it. Not one that, like, this game is on fire, fuck this, more just like, I'm really bored by this.
It feels, so I played about 45 minutes, which is, not much time to warrant or to garner too much of an opinion about the game, because it's really just a lot of setup and non-interactive tutorials and blah 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 blah. So you're just kind of getting the game world opened up to you. But it feels immediately, and I don't know if this is actually true, but this feels thematically true, and design-wise it feels true. So because these games are scattered across different teams, it seems like this is between 4 and this. We're starting to see the series splinter off in some ways in which you might start to have preferences based on who's working on those games. And this game feels like it picks up where 3 left off, and I did not like where 3 started or left off.
Yeah.
And even though 4 carried with it a bunch of the baggage of the Assassin's Creed games, the boat stuff, which is kind of the focus. I think when people think like, what do they love about 4? Like, the boat stuff was amazing, and none of that is here in Unity. But just in generally speaking, this feels like an evolution of 3 as opposed to taking the lessons and what people loved about Black Flag and building on them, because probably this game was well into development as Black Flag was finishing up, and to hit these precise release dates that Ubisoft goes for, because they like to have this as an annualized franchise, there is no room for error and probably no room for significant retooling of design, even if the fans have responded to elements of the previous game.
Yeah, and I agree with that sentiment. 3 is not a game that I finished, so I can't say where that game left off. But what I can say is that it definitely feels like it is born of the sort of self-serious, more kind of rigidly structured Assassin's Creed games of the past, which 1 and 2, I didn't play the 2 side games, but I played 1 and 2. Those were great games, or 2 was. 1, there's a debate to be had there. 3, just the one thing that Unity fixes over 3 is that the world is much more exciting to traverse. I really didn't like trying to dart around in Boston and stuff in that game. Like, because of the sort of colonial architecture, it just didn't feel like the right fit for me as far as like the kind of game you would typically play in Assassin's Creed. Here, Paris is gigantic. It's got a lot of like narrow alleyways, like tons of buildings, all sort of like smushed together. So it's really, when it works, when the traversal mechanics aren't breaking on you, it's actually a really awesome, breathtaking place to explore. But the pacing of the game, the story of the game, the self-seriousness of the game very much feel pre-Black Flag in that regard. And I think that's very unfortunate. I'm not saying that this game needed a boat, because I don't think that Assassin's Creed just needs to have boats forever from here on out. But the reason Black Flag worked was because it took the idea of the boat stuff from 3 and turned it into something that was very different and very exciting, at least for what you would normally come to expect from an Assassin's Creed game. It felt different, and it gave us a certain amount of energy and excitement to just being able to explore that new open world, that series of islands. Here, it just feels like you're kind of rolling right back into the old formula, and it's not like the missions and the story are not exciting enough to make that acceptable on its own.
So, here's the big question. When you were playing Unity, how long did it take before you had to do a mission where you trailed someone and got caught because the stealth mech in this game this series has generally been terrible?
I'm trying to think when the first time I really got caught doing stealth was, and I've actually been I found that I haven't run into too many situations where I just can't find a good place to hide or a guy just spots me for no reason.
But
I will
you know the
say,
missions I'm talking about
I know
where like,
exactly the kind of missions you're talking about. I've only had to follow people a couple of times, and I think part of that is because I haven't been doing a ton of the side missions yet. I feel like a lot of that stuff is probably going to get boiled into there. Um, Here, it's like there's been a couple of those instances, but for the most part, when I have been tailing people, it's like I've been in these houses where there's lots of different rooms to duck in, or if I have to eavesdrop, I'm down on like this bottom floor and there's a bunch of people above me talking, so there's no chance that I'm really going to get caught. So I don't think I've actually had one of those situations. I've definitely had issues where I've been trying to stalk a target and then suddenly, the guy just sort of walks by and then somehow notices me behind a wall. Like that has happened, but not so much with the tailing mission stuff.
okay, it sounds like an improvement, but why are those missions still there? It sounds like they're just making terrible things slightly more tolerable as opposed to finding some other way to deliver exposition that isn't through a cutscene, and it often happens through these tailing missions. I just cannot stand them. Everything I loved in Black Flag that at the end of every mission you could rate it, and I would always rate those 1 star because those tailing missions drive me nuts.
Well, I feel like that maybe they listened to those 1-star reviews because it seems like there are at the very least fewer of those, but they are not excised altogether. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Like I said, I still got a little ways to play through that game. Vinny and I are going to record a quick look today, where we'll probably show a little bit of the very early game stuff and then just wander around in the world for a while doing random crap. Um, I don't know. They built a gigantic playground in that game, and unfortunately, like most of the stuff in that playground just kind of feels like old hat or rehashed or is just dull, even if it is new. And like those murder mysteries could not be any duller.
It seems like Ubisoft. This was a problem I had with Watch Dogs as well. I mean, Watch Dogs had all sorts of issues, but we're speaking towards this open world template that Ubisoft has essentially created for itself, and then it kind of drops into different genres and settings. But there's a lot of consistency between Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs. They don't really know what to put in these worlds. They build these big worlds, and they're kind of fun to get around, but what's actually placed within them, sort of like the side stuff, like the participatory actions that you have beyond the story missions, they seem to be struggling to figure out how to actually fill them with anything that's fun.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I remember, so you bring up the in-game map, and you start out in just like one district, and there's tons of different districts around Paris, and you have to go to those sync points to sort of like to sort of unlock the areas on the map so you can see where the streets are and also like where all the little icons are. Once you get to a point where you've unlocked a bunch of those neighborhoods and you start getting all the stuff on the map, it looks like someone just barfed icons onto a map. Like there are so many, and it's just chests and side quests and just all these just tons of everything, and it's impossible to discern. Like thankfully there is a button that lets you cycle through, like if you just want to look at missions, or if you just want to look at some of the other just like chests and things like that. And that is vital, because if you just look at that map on its own, it is impossible to discern where I could not find any of the story mission icons for the first few minutes until I realized that switch was there. Again, like I've had maybe 30% of the missions I've played, side or main quest, have actually left like any sort of impression on me. The rest of it has just sort of been like, okay, I've done this thing. It's a lot like, here is yet another assassination mission that feels very much like the many other assassination missions I've done in this series, only I don't feel like I actually had to work very hard to make any of it happen. Another thing sorry, this is a brief aside, but another thing that kind of drives me crazy, they got rid of those confessional dialogue moments where when you kill your assassination target, and then they start talking to you for a little bit before.
That's like one of the best parts of the game.
I know, they replaced it with this thing where when you shove your blade into the guy, suddenly Arno just suddenly like starts seeing all these memories that the guy had, and it's so like instead of actually having a conversation, magical voodoo whatever just makes the information appear in your brain. And I don't know why they would have done that, because I loved those conversations. Those were like some of my favorite parts of the Assassin's Creed games, just hearing those guys like sputtering blood and saying horrible things to you right before they die. I love that shit.
Yeah, they didn't make any sense. Narratively, you sort of had to, pause and go, I don't care that this doesn't make any sense, but it was cool.
Yeah.
And it served a really interesting narrative purpose to give closure to whoever you were assassinating. You may not have bought their justification for their actions, but at least it was kind of that moment where you confront a monster, and that monster gets one last, attempt to articulate its point. And yeah, I thought that it was a really interesting and useful narrative trick.
It was. It was cool, and it was effective, and it gave those characters more personality, because right now I feel like every assassination target I have killed, I have gotten to know almost nothing about them. Like, you can go into the menus and you can read like their database entries or whatever, and that'll fill in some backstory. But like, part of the fun of killing those targets is being able to kind of learn something about them, like to discern a personality from them, like just getting a sense of who they are before you go after them. Usually they're vile motherfuckers, but they're creatively vile motherfuckers, or at least have some kind of personality that stands out. Here I've had none of that. Everyone I have killed has just been, with the exception of one guy who I won't talk about, but like nearly everyone I have had to kill in this game as a target has just been a different, like the one non-generic NPC out of a bunch of other generic NPCs kind of standing around, and I don't understand that at all.
So in the first, to your point about what we were talking about before about the sort of the open world problems that the Ubisoft game has, when I went into like 20 minutes in, I have a chance to kind of just walk around. It's one of the first moments where you're not being propelled forward towards an objective, and they're trying to teach you about like diving and the different sort of control mechanics. I realized there was a chest, and I was like, oh well, okay, let's see if this is any different in these games. I'm going to collect one of these chests, and then it said 1 of 20 in this district, and then I started looking at the map and realized, my God, there must be hundreds, if not thousands, of chests in this game.
Hundreds, definitely.
Feel scared for Vinny Caravella.
Yeah, and the other thing they've done is that some of the chests, so there's regular chests, there's lock chests, which you need the lock picking ability, which is something that you upgrade over time to open, and then these other ones that are tied to Uplay and this other, some sort of Assassin's Creed initiates program thing, which I haven't really messed with at all. But those are chests you straight up cannot unlock unless you attach yourself to a Uplay account and do some of that other stuff, which is
That's stupid.
Yeah, it's stupid. There's a lot of stupid. Like that the time travel-y stuff is stupid, and just everything that happens in it is stupid. All that, like, nothing has happened at all of note with the modern day shit. Like, there's been some narrative in there, and there's a couple of characters who talk to you. I guess the premise is that the player, are someone who was in the Abstergo machine, going through Arno's history, and these guys hacked the Matrix and tell you can join the Assassins and do stuff for us, and that'll be cool, and then you do, because it's not like you actually have a choice in the matter. That would be great. If I could actually play that game saying, no, fuck you, I'm just going to do this for the Templars, fuck you guys, that would have been an interesting choice, but instead, no. Trying to think what else there is even to talk about with this game. Like, I'm also kind of just disappointed, like, how underutilized certain aspects of it are, like the huge crowds. So far, that has come into play like twice. There's one area where I needed to use it to kind of get past some guards, and there was a second area where I kind of needed to use them to get past some guards. Like, that's kind of been the entire purpose of having those giant crowds, and so far it seems like it's cool. It makes the world look more alive, but as far as like gameplay purposes, I haven't really run into any significant situations where that stuff really was important. There's a whole series of like underground areas in the game where sometimes there'll be hidden chests, sometimes there will be like hidden enemy bases there and stuff. So far, again, I've had to go down into those underground areas like twice. It just feels like they put all this stuff in there, and if you are a completionist and you want to go hunt for everything, you'll run into all that stuff. But if you're just playing through the main quest and doing, a chunk of the side missions, you might actually just kind of miss some of that stuff.
Oh, I'm glad I paid money for this game.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like I said, I've had some fun with it, and it is gorgeous. Like, it does look amazing. And if they can find a way to fix that fucking frame rate, then maybe that game might pan out a little better.
I don't know, man. This seems to put the conversation that was happening about this game's resolution into a perspective that now makes complete sense. You have to imagine the resolution compromises they were making, regardless of how you feel, about the merits of that debate and the obsession over resolution. It is abundantly clear this game has some real optimization issues that they were not able to fully get their hands on any platform. This isn't, what you often have seen is that, well, the Xbox One doesn't quite get there, and the PC version isn't really optimized, but if you've got a good enough graphics card and CPU, you can kind of muscle way through it. And then the PS4 version, well, that's the one that kind of turned out okay, so that's the one to get. And I'm playing on PS4. In the first 30 minutes of the game, they rush you into this big crowd that you have to run through, and it clearly drops to like low 20s. It chugs its way through there, and this is an introductory sequence to the game.
Yep.
They are putting you through a section like that up front. They thought they were going to figure this stuff out. They wouldn't have built in one of your first experiences with the game being one in which you realize, oh boy, this frame rate is troublesome. And, it's not a game that relies on specific timing in a way that the frame rate is paramount in the way a shooter or a fighting game is, but I can live with a rock solid 30 with just about any game because I tend to not play a lot of those games in which frame rate is so paramount. But it is obvious how troubled it is in this game, and it happens so quickly that you can't help but be a little frustrated, especially given, Unity is supposed to be one of these first waves of current gen games that tells us, hey, this is why you spent $400, $500 on a new kit. And it doesn't do a particularly great job of demonstrating that these machines are capable of pulling off what the developers want to do.
Yeah, and you can tell that they really wanted this to be the game that, sort of made the new console sing, I guess. And just like I said, the world detail, the character detail, just all the visual stuff like I said, it's exquisite looking, but they didn't optimize it at all. And like you said, that opening fucking sequence is a wreck. Frame rate wise, I've had issues where, and I know you said that it's not technically usually a huge issue when just playing the game. There are times when it is. There are times when I've been running around and the game starts chugging, and then you'll see the character start kind of just jerking around, and I'll kind of lose my bearings and I'll lose track of where I am. I've had other issues where I was climbing and then the game just couldn't get the camera to pan around without the frame rate just exploding. And then I would either get stuck in something or be unable to keep moving. It does actually impact you as you play in some situations. Not all the time, but it does occasionally happen. But generally, it's reserved for cutscenes and just areas where you're running around where there's tons of people around. And considering the beginning of the game is a lot of cutscenes, it's not like they didn't know that was the first impression the game was going to be making.
I had this great moment right after that sequence. So the sequence that both of us are talking about, it's not a spoiler. You're just running and you happen to go through a crowded market, and that's where the frame rate just tanks really, really early. But as I did that, I went around a corner, and this happened just a couple of minutes ago, and I was trying to download that SharePlay or whatever that video editing software is on the PS4 because I wanted to take out this little chunk, but you run through this market, and I come around the corner, and then just this woman is just walking through the air in front of me.
Oh yeah.
Going, woo! Woo! And she's clearly reacting as though she's walking along the ground and she's scared of me and trying to get out of the way, but she is floating above me in the air.
So I've seen stuff like that. I've seen people start clipping through each other like crazy. I've had issues where I walked into a building and a person kind of got stuck on me, and so they got pushed into the building, and you could tell the game really fucking hated that because as soon as she got into the building, instead of walking out calmly, she did this. Like she just sort of like her character just sort of like no movement, just went stiff and then just like darted out of frame. Like there's a lot of little bugs like that. Like those don't really break anything, but
No, I mean they're
they
funny. I mean like that
yeah.
that video that Vinny put out last year from Black Flag, in which that cow is interrupting his mini game. Like that,
Yep.
I am 100% fine with that stuff. You know, I guess you can make the argument that it breaks the immersion or whatever, but I don't know. I can live with that stuff. It makes me laugh. This is a case where the smaller problems tend to just be more evidence of larger technical issues that have been a problem for the game and are a problem for the game, as opposed to just like with Black Flag, it was goofy. Like it was whatever. It's fine. This stuff's going to happen in open world games. I think we have come to just sort of expect that in a way that I don't think is a bad thing. I think part of these little weird glitches just kind of come with the territory. But Unity seems to be a case where the technical hiccups are inexcusable for a $60 day one game, in which combined with an embargo that doesn't give people the purchasing recommendations they would normally expect, it all adds up to Ubisoft knew they were going to be releasing something that was going to get mixed impressions at best.
Yeah. And it's not, like I said, it's not a horrendous game. It's just a kind of dull one with some very unfortunate technical problems. Like, it's by no means the most broken game I've even played this year, but it is. You can tell. Like, I mean, and I imagine in Ubisoft's case, even getting 6s or 7s or whatever for that franchise, that being their marquee franchise, is probably pretty fucking unacceptable to them. So in this case, I imagine they weren't necessarily expecting like 1s and 2s, but they weren't expecting a good reaction, and that was enough for them to try and get that kind of padding out there with reviews. It sucks, and frankly, I'll be the first to admit I'm kind of pissed, realizing that they timed that embargo so far away from the actual digital store release, because there's no nice way to put it. That's kind of shady, and that's kind of gross, and I feel bad about that, and I kind of wish, knowing what I had known, I wish they had told me that, but I also understand why they didn't tell me that, because if they had told me that, I might have gotten upset then instead of now. So here we are. So in the end,
Assassin's Creed Unity.
In the end, I am going to review this game. I'm not done with it yet. I will have it reviewed this week. My impressions are, you should wait on this one a little bit. See if another patch manifests itself. Like I said, they told me I have the day one patch for Xbox One. I don't remember if it downloaded or not. I can probably go and double check to see if it did, but I was under the impression that it had. Wait to see if the patches fix this one, because, I mean, granted, I don't think those patches are going to fix the kind of boring missions and the dearth of interesting story or really stuff to do, but they might make the game, run better at least, so there's that. I don't know, man. I feel bad. Like, there's parts of this game that I do like, but not nearly enough of them for me to say that I'm really having a great time. I really hope the last missions in that game are better than what I've been playing so far, because if they're not, oh boy, this one's going to be a mess.
Mac Wickus. Pretty good joke. A lot of jokes going into the chat, not all of them hitting, but this one, John Bamise should do an unfinished video for Assassin's Creed Unity. That was pretty good.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right.
So you're near the end. You're going to try and finish that today or tomorrow, and you'll have a review soon, but it seems like the message is show caution, see if the technical problems figure out themselves.
But even still, keep an eye out what people are saying about the actual content of that game, because for me, the content of that game has not really done a whole hell of a lot for me. And, I'd love to be able to say, well, maybe you should just go buy Rogue instead, but you know what? Rogue still hasn't shown up yet.
Yeah. Man, 2 Assassin's Creed games. Oh, that's too much Assassin's Creed. But that one has ship stuff, doesn't it?
It does. That game is definitely we still had all these boat assets laying around. We need to milk one more game out of this, so here we go.
Well, people seem to like Dragon Age.
Yeah. The impressions of that game seem overwhelmingly positive, which is great. Vinny and I checked that one out at an event a couple of months ago, and Vinny seemed pretty excited by what he played. I've never been a big Dragon Age player, but that said, I might actually take the plunge with this one because it seems like people are pretty excited about what this one's doing.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm jumping into the Dragon Age series fresh with Dragon Age Inquisition. Some of the reviews have suggested if you don't know what's going on, the game doesn't really hold your hand to introduce you to the universe and some of the plot twists that have already played out in previous Dragon Age games. So I think I need to do some reading this week to kind of get myself up to speed because there's no the idea that I'm going to try and play Dragon Age or Dragon Age 2 is just that's not going to happen in any realistic world. But I do want to jump into Inquisition because it sounds like it turned out really, really well, and I've kind of dodged that series for not any particular reason. So those reviews kind of pushed me over the edge, and I guess maybe I'll just kind of keep plucking away at Unity, but mostly I'll just be getting myself ready for Inquisition next week because at midnight, the credits rolled on Sunset Overdrive for me, and I thought, wow, at 12:02 I finished Sunset Overdrive just in time for me to start Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. And Overdrive, I haven't even had a chance to finish yet, along with a bunch of other things. But it sounds like the more you got into that game, the more excited you got about it.
It's fantastic, phenomenal, one of the best games of the year. It's just Sunset Overdrive really clicks and runs on all cylinders about 3-4 hours into the game when. So the traversal stuff was kind of frustrating me early on, in which I was getting around just fine, but I just constantly found myself falling off. And if you're on the ground and fighting the enemies, the OD in that game, it's not a great experience. They can inflict a ton of damage on you on the ground to the point where they're basically telling you, dude, you don't want to be down here. Get up there. So the fact that I was falling off all the time was just really driving me nuts. And then about 3 or 4 hours into the game, you get this air dash, and this air dash allows you to, at any time, it recharges immediately once you start grinding or touch the ground again. Allows you to, as the name implies, dash in any direction. But what this allows you to do, and what it informs you about the world, is that the world's been so smartly constructed that you can almost always get to some sort of vantage point or leverage or grinding spot with that air dash. So it allows you to course correct at any time, and if you find yourself in a tough spot, just jump off and dash in some direction, and you're probably going to land somewhere. And once you kind of get come to grips with this over the course of an hour or two, I mean, you can literally never touch the ground. I was making it across huge parts of the map and never ever touching the ground because I was grinding, then wall jumping, then dashing in the air, then falling 2 stories, then dashing into the water, and then doing the water dash that allows you to make it a decent amount there. You have such a tremendous amount of control and freedom over what your character does, and I think this is actually kind of funny to contrast it against Assassin's Creed, a series that sort of made its name on introducing us to this sort of free-form running, but that as the series has evolved, has found it difficult to give players more control over that. And Sunset Overdrive, at all times, once I had all these abilities unlocked, I was doing whatever I wanted, and it feels so goddamn good.
Yeah, no, it's awesome the way that game builds you up over time, because after a certain point, you get so in lockstep with the mechanics of it that, like you said, you don't ever have to really touch the ground if you don't want to. It's really easy to keep that going. And, I think that is a game where, as much as its early game attitude annoyed me, that faded very much into the background the more fun I was having with it. I still don't think the jokes are particularly great, and I don't really like the characters very much, but it doesn't matter because the playground is so much fun to mess around in. And the missions are designed in such a way that just kind of keep you engaged on a constant basis. That game is a hell of a lot of fun. It is literally the opposite of Assassin's Creed in that regard, where there is a shit ton of stuff to do, but so little of it is really engaging that I'm just kind of at the point now where I'm slogging through it because I have to, not because I really have any serious desire to keep playing, which is also the opposite of what 4 was, because with 4, that was the first AC game in a while that I can remember where I really wanted to go through and just play through all the side stuff. I was having a blast just sailing around, going from place to place, just trying to track down every little thing that I could do in it. With this one, once I'm done with the story and once I've played enough of the different side stuff to kind of get a feel for it all, I'm not going back to that stuff. It's just none of it has engaged me in a way that has made me want to keep playing.
I think the sort of the connective tissue between some of these games is so I don't think Sunset Overdrive side missions are particularly revelatory. A lot of them do
They're not,
sort of,
but
they do just kind of come down to collecting things or running around the world. But so the critical difference is that the side missions can just be about exploring the world in a pretty mundane way if exploring that world is so tremendously fun. And
yeah.
that's not the case in Assassin's Creed 3. It appears to not be the case in Unity. So even if I'm just, hey, here are 5 spots on the map, like go there and collect the thingamajig, yes, they could probably do more work there, and yes, there were times in Sunset Overdrive where I was like, really, I'm just, now I'm just gonna fast travel because I just want to get through this quest chain and not worry about it. But for most of the game, for most of the side quests, the world and the traversal was so enjoyable that it didn't matter to me, and I think that speaks both to Assassin's Creed failing to generate a world that's interesting to traverse and get around, and it's also what happens with annualization, is that fundamentally these games are kind of the same thing. For introduced the boats, which and an interesting world, and so it did enough that you felt like it was new and fresh, but it was still pretty much Assassin's Creed, and the fact that Unity is such a return to form vis-a-vis 3. If this was a game that we were playing every 3 years, I think it might be a different response. But we can't have that response because you can't view the series in a vacuum. You have to view it as this is a game we play every single year.
Yeah, it is, and it not for any particularly great reason either, other than Ubisoft needs to have that big banner franchise to release every year. That automatic moneymaker. And I will be shocked if this game does not sell remarkably well, because these games always sell remarkably well. 3 sold remarkably well, despite the fact that reviews. Were reviews even that unkind to that game? I felt like I was kind of on a weird island when that game came out, and
Really?
a lot of people. Yeah.
Ryan really liked that game, and the rest of us were like, Ryan, we don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there you go.
And Ryan reviewed it. But I mean, he was, of all of us, the biggest Assassin's Creed fan for sure, and he liked 3. We all bullied him out of liking 3 in the Game of the Year stuff because all of us disliked that game so heavily. But he did genuinely, like that game. And there are people that like 3. I don't fall in that camp whatsoever. But yeah, I don't know. Also to your point about it, whether it's going to sell well or not. I mean, there's not a whole lot out this fall that tries to justify your purchase of a current gen machine. A lot of stuff is coming out on multiple platforms. Maybe looks fairly looks worse on those platforms, but Assassin's Creed Unity is one of the few games that's saying, hey, you bought an Xbox One and a PS4, we're going to give you something just for that, and we're going to try and take advantage of that. They fumbled the technical stuff, but it is one of those few games that you can genuinely say there's nowhere else to play it.
Yeah, and PC, but whatever.
Well, sure, yeah, it is always that outlier in the discussion.
Right. So yeah, look for a review of that soon, I guess. I don't know. I'm pretty bummed about my time with Unity so far, but we'll see. Maybe it'll pick up in the end. That would be nice if it gave me a little something to just make me feel like I would want to keep playing this. But thus far, it has not gotten me there yet. I even got to the crazy World War II shit. Guess what? That shit makes no fucking sense. Why is that shit there? I don't know. I don't fucking know. I don't care. Someone said, hey, the Eiffel Tower should probably be in this game, so they fucking put it in there, and great. Have fun. I don't know, man. Video games. You know what the best game I played this weekend was, Patrick?
What?
Hour-long thing called A Bird Story.
Yeah! A Bird Story is great!
It's really nice. It's cool. It's, it's not a ton of game, but it is like a really cool short story that's done by the guy who made To the Moon, Kan Gao. It is, like I said, it's an hour long. It has no dialogue in it. It's just a story about a boy and his best friend that's a bird. It's a little bit abstract and a little bit weird, and I kind of loved it.
It was really refreshing. It is unlike anything I have played in a while. It's unlike anything you'll play the rest of the year for sure. And it costs $5. I think it might still be on sale for a little bit cheaper on Steam. It's still in its first week of release or so. But yeah, it's an hour long. It's cute. It's charming. It'll probably remind you of some story of your own growing up. I don't want to really say too much about the story because it is only an hour long, so there's not a whole lot to unpack there. But it's a story of a kid and an animal, and I guess that's all you should really say about what happens. But it's $5. It's an hour. It's super charming, and if you haven't played To the Moon, you should also correct that.
Yeah. And some people have said, what if I like the idea of To the Moon and I didn't really care for that game schema or dialogue, which is fair. I liked it, but I can see why someone. This game has no dialogue. It is all just wordless action, and it still manages to convey its story perfectly without actually having to say anything at all, and I very much appreciate that.
To the Moon was one of those games that I sort of brushed aside for a while because it purposely adopts a sort of JRPG aesthetic. It's not a JRPG. It just sort of employs, so that 16-bit overhead pixel style that was, made famous from the Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, basically a lot of Square Enix stuff, very specifically, and tells a really heartwarming, about as close. If you've never cried during a game, To the Moon might not change that, but I guarantee it's going to get you closer than any other game has in the past. That was certainly the case with me. It's a story with a lot of twists and turns, and it's also because it's all story based. It's also one I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole in terms of spoiling it for people, other than to say you should play To the Moon. It really is something else, and there you do more stuff. Mechanically speaking, or maybe not mechanically, because there's really aren't mechanics in To the Moon, but there are more interactive elements in To the Moon, of which there are precious few in A Bird Story, but A Bird Story really just has a story to tell, and you happen to be there to guide a character up, down, left, and right occasionally, and interact with a couple of objects. But it's really, when we say interactive story, A Bird Story really is the epitome of that. But I don't think it takes away from what it's trying to do at all.
No, not at all, and it's something that Vinny and I will probably take a very, very quick look at, but it's $5. Go check it out. If you like, cute storytelling in games, that is something that you should definitely try.
Yeah. That was a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I was super surprised, really, as I liked To the Moon so much, but when he sent me the code and he was like, "Here, let me send you this YouTube video, sort of explain what it is I'm going for." It's an hour-long pixel short, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I don't really understand." But once you play it, you understand why it is the way it is. It is, I think, it is exactly the right length and pretty much the right amount of interactivity for what that guy is trying to do.
So yesterday, Jeff Keighley announced that there is going to be a new video game award show.
Finally.
3 weeks, December 5th, I believe it is that Friday, December 5th in Las Vegas. It is called the Game Awards? Yes, the Game Awards. That is technically a title. It's more it's more descriptive than anything else, but it is technically a title for this award show.
All right, sure. So is this what he's doing now instead of the VGAs? Because the VGAs don't exist anymore, or do they? What's happening?
There was a brief Q&A with Jeff Keighley on Kotaku in which he said that Spike, owns the rights to the VGAs and could theoretically do something with them. But it has been pretty clear that Jeff Keighley has been the driver of that award show for a number of years, and I would be frankly surprised if they probably would have announced something by now, right? If something was going to happen this year, we're nearing the time when this award show would normally be happening, and it appears if you look at the backers of the Game Awards, that they appear to kind of be a lot of the folks that Jeff Keighley knows. So my guess is that is all switched over to the Game Awards, and it's if you want the closest thing that the video games has to an Oscars, it's the GDC awards that happen in February or March, depending on when GDC falls. And the Game Awards / VGAs is really just a marketing vehicle that also happens to hand out some awards.
Right. It's the Video Music Awards.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. That is. Yeah, I've never thought about it that way, but you are totally right.
That's what they were going for. They never achieved the level of entertainment that the Video Music Awards achieved at their height. But even still, both of those things were very clearly marketing-driven enterprises, as a lot of award show tends to be. But some have more prestige attached to them than others. Video Music Awards, not really a prestige thing, never have been. VGAs, I would definitely put those in the same category.
Yeah, you're there to be entertained, hopefully, and the VGAs.
Theoretically.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
When Joel McHale isn't actively insulting you every 3 minutes, yeah, you're entertained.
Well, it's entertained in a different way.
Yeah.
That was something else last year.
That was a man who did not want to be there.
I mean, there was a man who was actively sort of deriding his co-host. Yes. The man who ostensibly asked him to be there.
Aggressively.
God, I hope he's there. He's probably not going to come back, but there was something special about that. It was incredibly awkward to watch at the time, but
brutal to watch at the time.
Now I got to go watch some of those clips again. I remember just watching that, just feeling bad. It's like, oh, Jeff, oof. I know you're trying to do a good thing here, and you're probably single-handedly responsible for, propelling No Man's Sky into the spotlight in a way that it might not have gotten any other way, but. Ooh, had to sit through some awkward times with Joel McHale.
Yeah, and we'll see how this one goes. I don't know. It's another video game award show. I reserve the right to not feel like that's an important thing in any way, shape, or form.
It's newsworthy. I'll watch it for that. I like getting excited about new games. I'll watch a trailer. So my butt will be firmly planted in a seat with a laptop out. When that takes place on Friday, December 5th, which it won't be on TV this time. It's going to be broadcast on Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, Steam, and other services to be announced. But they're not going the TV route this time, just because there aren't that many places to broadcast something like that on television anymore. G4's gone, Spike is getting out of it, so where is it going to go? It's going to go to these other services. So.
The El Rey Network?
Sure, yeah. I think let me double check. I got an embargoed thing this morning. Make sure this has been properly announced. So some of the first details on the Game of Thrones series that Telltale is doing. They teased yesterday over Twitter that, hey, this is coming really soon, which struck me as sort of odd given that we have next to no details on this series. And they were implying it's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, and so there are some updated details on Telltale's blog. They still don't have a release date for it, but the last paragraph says additional details on the series and its upcoming premiere episode, Iron from Ice, are forthcoming. Stay tuned here to the Telltale's blog. Blah 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 blah. For more information as we approach the premiere, the first of 6 episodes, which arrive for download soon on PC, Mac, PS4, PS3, Xbox One, 360, and iOS. With additional platforms to be announced. I mean, soon, I have to imagine that is before the year is up, probably sometime in early December, if I had to take a guess.
It's interesting that they have said so little about this game going in. They have been far more active in promoting Tales from Borderlands than they have this thing up to this point. And Tales from Borderlands still hasn't come out yet, has it?
No. I feel like what's going to happen here is that they can't put out an episode a month, but they can put out an episode every 2 months, roughly speaking. So I feel like we're going to get Game of Thrones and Tales from Borderlands relatively in close proximity, so that becomes our alternating Wolf Among Us, Walking Dead, basically.
Yeah, because that worked out so well for The Walking Dead Season 2 and The Wolf Among Us. Those games turned out spectacularly.
I'm going to at least play the first episode of Tales from Borderlands, and then I will leave it to my wife whether we continue to play that. I don't particularly have a lot of interest in the Borderlands universe. I've not really played those games, but we've had a tremendous amount of fun playing the Telltale adventure games together. It's one of the few things we do play together. So we'll play that first episode. She can pull the trigger or not. We'll definitely play the Game of Thrones ones because we're obsessed with that show. And I'm super curious to see how Telltale handles a serious subject matter. I mean, obviously, Game of Thrones is still sort of high fantasy and things like that, but it is.
Well, I mean, The Walking Dead was pretty serious.
I guess so. I guess you're right.
Yeah, they know how to do the serious, or at least they did at one time know how to do the serious tone stuff.
It's zombies, though, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that the Game of Thrones, with if you haven't watched it, I don't want to spoil anything, has some fantastical elements to it, but they're not. That's not the moment to moment. The moment to moment drama of Game of Thrones is the interaction of people against people and a lot of politics. So
Yeah.
that's the part I'm curious to see how it plays out. So I'll definitely be playing that series. And it's possible the reason Telltale hasn't talked a whole lot about it is because this one is being made in collaboration with HBO. And if the series is starting in late November or early December, it's going to start overlapping with promotion for the new season of Game of Thrones, which traditionally starts in March. So there may be some chess pieces that are happening there in which Telltale might normally be more open about it, but HBO may be calling some of the shots here.
Yeah, sounds likely. And before I dart out of here, because I got to go record this quick look with Vinny, we should probably just briefly mention Just Cause 3 has officially been announced.
Right? Holy shit! Am I excited for Just Cause 3?
I have nothing to add to that. I'm very excited also for Just Cause 3. That is great.
So I'm glad that's formally announced. I know there's been some hand-wringing over the microtransactions that appeared to be in some leaked screenshots for Just Cause 3. We'll see how that stuff pans out, what exactly is going on there. Maybe that's just in development stuff and not a reason to be totally freaked out just yet. But I have not had a chance to look at any of that yet. But yes, obviously Just Cause 3 has been announced. Just Cause 2 is amazing. You should still go and check out Just Cause 2 if you have not played it. I'm sure it is super cheap on Steam, runs great on old PCs. So if you've not played Just Cause 2, you should get on that because Just Cause 3 is hopefully going to be incredible. And I'm just glad that they're making it because as excited as I was for Avalanche to be making Mad Max, I secretly just wanted Just Cause 3 instead. So.
And theoretically, they're still making that Mad Max game, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're definitely making that. Last thing I'll address is that some people in the chat are saying, "Hey man, Valkyria Chronicles is coming out on PC." So yeah, it is, and I am going to check that out for us. People are swamped with a lot of other things happening, review season, so I'm going to check out Valkyria Chronicles because I've said I'm going to play that game, and I'm actually going to play that game. So look for something from me on that later in the week. But that's going to do it for the morning-ish show. I guess no, because we started at noon.
Well, it was morning on the West Coast still.
Yeah, 10 a.m. still on the West Coast, and I'm sure morning in other parts of the world. So that's going to do it. We'll be back on a Friday when maybe I'll have a chance to have digested a little bit more of that Just Cause 3 news. I'll have played some more Unity, and so will everyone else. So, Alex, I will talk to you on Friday.
Ooh.